Hey, everybody. Welcome to the On the Right Side podcast, coming to you live, 2 p.m. every Wednesday at the America First Warehouse here in Ronkonkoma on Long Island, New York. I'm your co-host, Steve Levy. I'm the former Suffolk County executive here on Long Island, former New York State Assemblyman, and presently serve as the executive director of the fiscally conservative think tank, the Center for Cost-Effective Government. I'm normally joined at this podium with my partner, David Zare, who is a regular with Real America's Voice, and in fact, they have him working in Washington, D.C. today, covering many of the big issues and elected officials down there. So it's all to myself for this particular segment. And it gives me the opportunity to delve into some items that I really care very deeply about. Usually, as you know, if you watch this show regularly, you'll see David and myself, or potentially another guest, talking about what are the hot issues of the day. You know, today it's like, what happened in Australia, that horrible shooting, or what's going on the coast of Venezuela with the blockade, or Chief of Staff Susie Wiles writing this, discussing the inner details of the Trump White House, all pertinent stuff. But we'll save that for the later segments. I want to take these first two segments to discuss some things that I care deeply about that you can read about in my book, the Solutions to America's Problems, which I wrote back in 2020 during the COVID break. And it lays out about 15 or so chapters of things that are plaguing the United States of America, from illegal immigration to high college costs to the national debt, the terrible healthcare system that we have, how unaffordable it is. And I not only talk about the root causes of these problems, but also the actual solutions. So I hope you would pick up the book if you want to get a quick synopsis as to what's causing these problems and what the very easy fixes are if we only had the political will. In a prior podcast, I talked about the disparity within our educational system and what we can do to fix it. I want to start this segment talking about election integrity, because it really burns me, and probably does you as well, when you see these liberal media folk. And by the way, check out my other book, Bias in the Media, which goes deeply into the liberal bias within the mainstream media. But it burns me up, and you as well, I know, when so many will tell you, oh, this election in 2020 was the safest we ever had. And that's such garbage. It's a talking point that very few in the media actually seek to dissect. Well, I dissect it. I dissected in my book, Solutions to America's Problems. I also dissected it in a white paper that you can read about on our website at the Center for Cost-Effective Government. We ask you to go there, www.centerforcosteffectivegovernment.org. Click on the white paper segment. You'll see white papers on how to save Social Security, how Medicaid has gone out of control, why we need school choice, how pensions are starting to explode in the public sector. And we have one on election integrity. And what I saw happen in 2020 were the moons and the stars and all these things aligning for the perfect storm to rig our elections. Now, I don't say the election was stolen. I frankly thought that, President Trump's numbers were way underwater. He probably wasn't going to win that election anyway. But if people ask me, was it stolen? I'd say probably not. You don't know for sure. But was it rigged? Yeah, it was rigged in many ways. Just go back to the Molly Ball article. I think it was Time Magazine or Newsmax after the election, where the Democrats themselves were bragging how they rigged the election in working with the social media titans like Jack Dorsey over at Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, where they changed the algorithms because they felt so guilty about all the publicity, the free publicity they gave to Trump back in 2016. They say, we're not going to make that mistake again. We're going to make sure that we shadow ban and push down all the conservative commentary. And that's exactly what they did. And it's not me saying it. They say it. They were bragging about it. So it was rigged in that way. It was rigged with the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020, where they purposefully suppressed it with the help of the FBI and some of the intelligence agencies. But the social media companies were very willing to go along with that suppression because it benefited their preferred candidate in Joe Biden. But back to 2020, COVID was the perfect excuse for the liberals, for the left, for the Democrats, and their friends in the media to sway the election. And how did they do it? They did it through mail-in balloting and so many other changes that Democratic governors and secretaries of state were able to implement really contrary to the law. Because if you look at the Constitution itself, it says quite clearly that election law is under the purview of state legislators, not governors alone, not secretaries of state alone, but the state legislatures and not the courts. The state legislatures have to make these changes. But governors used emergency powers during COVID in 2020, along with Democratic secretaries of state, to say, oh, this is an emergency. We have to change our voting laws. Now, okay, might have been an emergency, and you had a right to try to change your laws, but that doesn't mean you can exclude the legislatures, the state legislatures. Why did they want to exclude them? Because the legislatures, at least one house was Republican, and they'd need those Republican supports, the Republican support, to get the changes made. They didn't want to do that because they know they couldn't push through these radical changes. So what did they do? They said, we're just doing it on our own. We're going to go to the courts, and we'll do it that way. And they bypassed the legislature. What did they do? Some really, really horrific things. All these things were happening at once. They started to mass mail out to everyone, whether people wanted the ballot or not, requested it or not. Hey, Bill, in the control room, if you could put up our first screenshot here, we'll go over some of the items, maybe a little hard for you to read, within our white paper that talk about all the ways that the Democrats changed the electoral system that diluted the integrity of the ballot. Okay, so just to quickly go over the headlines on these, and we'll get into more detail in the next segment, but we could talk about President Carter's commission going back to 2005, when Democrat Jimmy Carter was the one warning America that mail-in ballots are the greatest possibility of producing a fraudulent election beyond anything else. He was ignored. It was no longer convenient to listen to him. Fewer safeguards in the signature process at the same time that mail-in voting was exploding. You would have thought that when you were mass mailing all of these ballots throughout the electorate, that you toughen up the signature process and the verification. No, it was the other way around. They weakened the process. We'll get into those specifics with greater detail. Faster than ever, easier than ever for illegal aliens to vote. We'll get into that. Refusing to purge the election rolls, the dangers of ballot harvesting, and I'll talk about examples of how bogus signatures were actually verified. Bill, you can bring it back to my pretty mug over here, okay? Now, let's start with Jimmy Carter. He said this mail-in voting stuff, it's rife with potential fraud. Now, it wasn't just Jimmy Carter saying this. You look at European nations, Western democracies. We are the outlier who went toward mail-in voting. Some of these European nations had flirted with mail-in voting. England, France, they threw it out. They revoked it after a few elections because they, in fact, uncovered fraud within the mail-in voting process. It's much easier to do than when you have to go there and show up and show an ID, which in America is still forbidden in some of these states. Oh my God, show an ID. Again, we're the outlier. Every nation around the world, you show an ID. But Democrats and their friends in the mainstream media say, well, no, that's voter suppression, because in a very racist way, they say that, you know, African Americans and minorities, they don't have the wherewithal to have an ID. You have to protect them, otherwise you're suppressing their votes. So racist, so disgusting. But they do this because, in fact, they want the type of fraud that can sometime develop. So we're going to talk about this more in our next segment and get into some of the details as to why the first bill in 2020 put in by Nancy Pelosi was H.R. 1, which sought to ban voter ID, ban purging of the rolls. Why? You could say they might have wanted more fraud because it benefits their side. Stick with us. We'll talk about it more in 3 minutes.
Noticed your money just doesn't stretch like it used to? Your paycheck feels lighter and your savings aren't growing. The culprits? Inflation and increased money supply. They've both been quietly eating away at your purchasing power for years. Today, the dollar's value has dropped significantly. You feel it every time you spend money on goods and services. Back in 1965, $1 or an ounce of silver could buy you a gallon of milk. Fast forward to today. That same dollar barely buys a couple of coffee creamers, while an ounce of silver would get you 8 gallons of milk. Gold and silver have held their value for centuries. If you had 2,500 ounces of silver back in 1965, you could buy a brand new Ford Mustang. Today, 2,500 ounces of silver would buy you 2 Mustangs. Similarly, in the year 2000, 628 ounces of gold would buy a new $170,000 home. Today, 628 ounces would buy you a $2,500,000 home. The problem? 95% of Americans don't own physical gold or silver. They think it's too complicated and too expensive, but it doesn't have to be. We offer a membership program that allows you to buy gold or silver with as little as $1. You can buy fractional amounts, safely vault them, or have them delivered to your doorstep, and you can liquidate them whenever you want at the highest buyback price in the industry. Ready to protect your wealth and keep your purchasing power? Scan the QR code or go to tafw.soundmoney.com to learn more.
Join us for the Family and Freedom Christmas Concert at the America First Warehouse, featuring Natasha Owens, award-winning artist and singer-songwriter of the viral hit Trump Won. An unforgettable night of powerful music, patriotic spirit, and Christmas celebration. Bring your family, bring your friends, and come celebrate the values that unite us this Christmas at the America First Warehouse.
It's me, Joe the Box.
And I'm John the Blanket with the America First Podcast.
That's what I'm talking about. The Fred Rubino Podcast, coming to you from the America First Warehouse.
Welcome to Right for America. Issues that unite, don't ignite.
I'm James Justice. We got Stephen Ruth over here. What are we doing, Steve? Fighting!
Welcome to the Patriots Podcast. Good evening, everyone. We live stream every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. right here from the America First Warehouse, the most patriotic venue in all the land.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the On the Right Side podcast here at the America First Warehouse in Long Island, New York.
Welcome to Liberty's Cage, the podcast tearing down the walls of America's broken justice system.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin Downey Jr. podcast. Be free, stay free.
Welcome to Suffocating in Suburbia with me, your host, Stevie GB.
Hey, folks, welcome back. Steve Levy here on the Right Side Podcast. My usual partner in crime, David Zare, is covering the White House and the Pentagon today for Real America's Voice. So I'm on my own here. I'm the former Suffolk County executive and New York State Assembly member. I get to put in some plugs at the beginning of this segment. Come down here to the America First Warehouse if you've never been here. It's an amazing museum for patriots. It's got a big venue. Joe the Box is our proprietor and makes this all possible. We have a lot of great events here, and there's one coming up on Saturday, December 20th, a big holiday party for a lot of great people that you meet here. The doors open at 7. It's a $35 a head shindig, so come on down for that. Also, in the previous commercial slot, you saw something about gold, and I saw that, and I got into it, and I actually like it. So every month I put a little more money into gold. If you want to follow suit, just go to TAFW, that's in the America First Warehouse, TAFWsoundmoney.com. You won't regret it. It comes out to be really profitable in the end, I think. And it goes up and down, but long-term gold has been a great investment. All right. First segment, I was talking about election integrity and how it's been so diluted since 2020, okay? And often you will hear the mainstream media, the talking points by Democrats and their allies in the media, oh, it's a conspiracy theory that the election was diluted and it was a shaky election. Again, I don't say it was a stolen election. I do say, however, that actions were taken in that election that were horrific regarding election integrity. And they'll tell you, oh, there were all these court challenges and they were all debunked. Not true. Not true. The overwhelming majority of these court hearings, and you can see the specifics, they're actually listed in our white paper that you can find on the Center for Cost-Effective Government website.org. You'll see all of these cases that went through. They were almost all thrown out on technicalities. Either the judge said that you don't have standing to bring this case, goodbye, or, you know what, the election's over, too late, it's over. Okay? That's exactly what happened in Pennsylvania. Let's understand what happened in Pennsylvania. Let's say, oh, there were no shenanigans here, right? The Democratic governor, then Wolf, and the Secretary of State, then Shapiro, who is now the governor there. It might have been Shapiro. It might have been someone in between. But he was Democrat, the Secretary of State at the time. They said, we want to extend the date upon which we can accept the mail-in ballots. Now, no longer on Election Day, we want to accept those that come after Election Day. That's not the law in Pennsylvania. But they say, we want to change it. Okay, you want to change it? Go to the legislature and get them to vote to change it. Well, they did, and the legislature said no. So what did they do? It's COVID. We have emergency powers. So we're going to do it ourselves. And then they enlisted the help of a liberal not-for-profit who sued the state to say, we demand that we should be able to count ballots that come in after Election Day. So what happens, it goes back and forth in the court, never gets settled by a court. The Secretary of State and the governor, they decide to settle with the same liberal plaintiffs that you know they prompted to bring this lawsuit, right? So we settled. It's now law. The court sanctions it. It's law. Baloney. The Republicans jump up and down and say, you can't do that. It's illegal. They go through the court system. They go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, wouldn't it have been great if the Supreme Court before the election said, you can't do that? You cannot bypass the state legislature. A court through a settlement cannot do what only the Constitution says only the state legislature can do. But what did the Supreme Court do under Justice Roberts? They said, we don't have enough time to delve into this. Come back after the election. They're basically saying you're premature and we don't have enough time. All right, come back after election. So guess what? Biden wins the state. They come back after election, and they say, okay, Supreme Court, throw this out now because they did it illegally. All of these ballots, they came in after the fact, should not have counted. What does the Supreme Court say? Not all of them. Justice Thomas put in a blistering dissent, but they said, oops, too late. The election's over. It's now moot. So they never decided the issue on the merits. They punted before the election saying it's premature. Then they punted after the election saying too late, it's moot. For the Republicans, it was flip a coin. Tails, you lose. Heads, they win. You couldn't win in this situation. Disgusting. So when people say that, the Democrats say that the courts threw these out on the merits, not true. Other examples, okay? In Wisconsin, the Secretary of State illegally allowed for drop boxes to be popped up everywhere so the ballots can be dropped in the box without any chain of custody, any command of where they came from. The court actually said, you can't do that, okay? So don't let the Democrats and the media tell you, oh, all these court decisions were dismissed. In Michigan, the Secretary of State issued unilateral edicts and guidance saying, I now declare that all the signatures coming in on these mail-in ballots are presumed valid. Who the hell are you to make that declaration? There were lawsuits that ensued, and guess what? The court said, you can't do that. It said she exceeded her authority. Now, here's the kicker. Okay, there were courts that said they exceeded their authority. What happened as a result? Butkus? Nothing? So you have to scratch your head. Okay, they did illegal things. You now have these ballots that were really invalid. Can't you void those ballots or the election in that case? They didn't do it there, but you know where they did do it? Go back to 2018 in North Carolina, when a court threw out the election and said, do it over. Why? Because a Republican candidate had his underling illegally ballot harvest. And the court looked at it and said, you couldn't do that. You brought in all of these votes that were not proper. I'm calling for a do-over. That's the only time I remember something like that happening, and it happened to be where a Republican was guilty in breaking the law. When it was reversed, there were no such do-overs, okay? But this brings us back to the whole concept of ballot harvesting. Why is that so insidious? This was another thing that really blew up with COVID and after the election. Oh, I can't get to the polling booth on election day, so I'll either mail it in, or if someone wants to come along and pick it up, oh, no problem there, huh? Baloney, no problem there. This stuff isn't allowed in other nations. What is ballot harvesting? It allows a third party, a political operative, to go knocking on a door with a ballot in hand and say, hey, Joe Blow, I got a ballot here. Why don't you fill it out? I'll take it and I'll bring it to the Board of Elections. There's a reason this has been illegal for most of American history, because the potential for abuse there is enormous. Imagine it's Cuba, and for the first time they're going to have a so-called free election. Or Maduro does this, and Maduro in Venezuela says, we're going to send our guys out to every house with a ballot in hand and have people fill it out. Don't worry, we'll take it for you. Are you going to be confident in that system? That the community organizer, who we know are 99% Democrats, who, by the way, were funded by all the Mark Zuckerberg's money, $300 million back in 2020. That's where we talk about the rigged election. $300 million goes from Zuckerberg to all of these organizations to go out into the field and get these ballots. And then they see, oh, he voted for Trump. I'm going to throw it in the garbage. Or he voted for our guy, we bring it in there, okay? Then you have the opportunity to just take all of these ballots that are circulating throughout America, forge a signature and dump it in the drop box. Nobody knows where it came from. They can't go back to you and arrest you for forging that signature. So then you'll say, oh, but they can catch the fraud with the signature verification, right? Wrong. Sometimes you do, but they were lowering the threshold for an approval, presuming they're okay, allowing only one person at the Board of Election, the Democrat or the Republican, to approve of it instead of two, which always had to be the case in the past. That's the way it was in New York, and they diluted it, where now it's only one. Here's another example. Fellow Victor Jokes over in Las Vegas did a study. He sent in 9 ballots for people he knew. He signed their name in his penmanship. 8 of the 9 were accepted by the Board of Election. Bogus signatures on these ballots. 8 out of 9 accepted. So now you're asking, how many others were like that in Nevada, in Texas, in Dakota, in California? And you know the only answer that rings true? I don't know, and you don't know, and nobody knows. We don't know how many other bogus signatures just like that were accepted by boards of election. That's why, forget about the past, look to the future. Stop this potential for fraud. Tighten up the system. Stop mailing out these ballots indiscriminately. Stop the ballot harvesting. Require voter ID. Require a purging of the rolls. We're going to be back in 3 minutes to talk about this and many more hot topics.
You've worked hard and saved, but inflation and increased money supply are eroding your buying power. Protect and grow your wealth with physical gold and silver. Sound Money. With a Sound Money wallet, your wealth stays in your control. Buy fractionally, vault securely, ship directly, and instantly liquidate your gold and silver at the highest buyback price in the industry. Real money, real ownership. Visit tafwsoundmoney.info or scan the QR code and start securing your financial future today.
The America First Ultra MAGA Store. For all your MAGA needs. We sell t-shirts, tumblers, flags, hats, sneakers, bumper stickers, and a whole lot more. The most patriotic America First retail store. The America First Ultra MAGA Store.
Live from Studio 6B on a Friday night, live at the America First Warehouse. Live at the America First Warehouse on a Friday, Real America's Voice, all across the country, 103.9 LI News Radio, all across your radio, Suffolk County, Long Island. Glad you're in.
Corporate transfer. Fine professional, moving and storage, and inventory management.
America First Warehouse was really the most patriotic venue that you can ever imagine. We wanted to build something for people to be able to come to and feel so comfortable and so relaxed because there is nothing out there like it. We give an opportunity for people to really feel good about themselves and about this great country.
Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Steve Levy, your host of the On the Right Side podcast that comes to you live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at the America First Warehouse. This place is just awesome. If you've never seen it, you've got to get here. Put it on your schedule for your next trip to Long Island. Joe the Box, who runs the place, is kind enough to allow yours truly and David Zare to have this podcast every Wednesday live. David is on assignment this week down at the White House for Real America's Voice. So I have this all to myself over here. And when I do, I try to talk about different chapters within the books that I've written. I'm a former Suffolk County executive, state assembly member, but I'm also a policy wonk. I run the Center for Cost-Effective Government, a fiscally conservative think tank. I wrote a book back in 2012 called Bias in the Media. I was a Democrat for most of my life, my political life at least. I got elected as a Democrat, but in 2010 I just had enough of their support for illegal immigration and constant spending. I was a fiscally conservative Democrat, so I switched to Republican. And as soon as I did, the media switched on me from praising me and being very supportive to all of a sudden having a very negative view. Then I wrote a book in 2020 called Solutions to America's Problems, where I go through many of the problems we're facing in the country today with solutions to those problems. I just finished talking about election integrity being one of those problems. Another is the issue of income inequality. Not only that we have income inequality, which is always going to be the case in a free market system, as opposed to a communist system, but they have inequality as well with their oligarchs versus everyone else. But the talk these days about the younger generation especially wanting to veer away from a free enterprise system and head more toward a socialist communist system. It's really quite scary as to where they're coming from with this. So when you hear that we need a fairer tax system, Bill, put up the the asset here so I can show people some of the stats, okay? This is how ridiculous that really is. This was back in 2019, these stats, but they're pretty similar today, okay? Did you know that the top 1% of the population earned 21% of the country's income, but paid about 40% of all the individual income tax? So you say, oh, the rich have to pay their fair share. They're 1% of the population. They earn 21% of the income, and they put in about 40% of all the revenues that come to the federal government. Now, they paid a greater share than the entire 90%, bottom 90% of the residents paid. So if you're in the top 50% of all earners, you paid 97% of all the taxes that come into the federal government. If you're under 50%, you paid about 3%. So we can get off the asset there. But that's your answer. When people say, oh, we need a fairer tax code. Come on. The top 1% paying 40% of all the revenue? Now, here's the bigger kicker. The socialists will say, like Mendami, like de Blasio before him, like AOC and Bernie Sanders, if we just tax the rich more, we'll get more money in that we can do all these wonderful things with it to help the poor and the working class. And you know what? It just ain't so. because the stats, and you can read this in my book, Solutions to America's Problems, which you can get on Barnes & Nobles and Amazon. There's a whole chapter in there talking about how tax cuts actually bring in more revenue into the government coffers to help the poor and the working class. We saw it with John Kennedy. Back in the 1960s, he slashed income tax rates. By the way, that's a Democrat who would never be elected in a Democratic primary today. But what happened as a result of those tax cuts? Did we have a huge deficit because now you weren't bringing in as much money? No, the opposite. More money came in. Why? Because there was tremendous economic growth, more opportunity, more people working, making higher wages. Wages went up significantly, 5-6%. When people make more money, you can tax them to a greater extent because they all have higher incomes. You get more money in. Same thing happened with Republican Ronald Reagan in the 80s. Cut taxes. They all said, oh, you're going to get less money coming in. They actually got more money coming in. And wages grew 5-6%. You had GDP growth in the 5-6% range, which was huge, humongous. So now you say, okay, Steve, you're telling me all about this, but the deficits exploded in the Reagan years. You're right. I'm not denying that. But very important to understand, and this is what Republicans have to do to respond to that claim. They spent too much money. It wasn't a matter of too few dollars coming into the coffers. They actually had more money coming in, but they were spending more. Why? Because they were spending for defense through the gills, and they kept their social spending going up, even though they did try to cut somewhat domestically. Same thing happened in the Trump years, okay? Trump cut taxes in 2017. Everybody said it was going to lead to less money coming in. More money came in. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. You can look it up in our chapters or on our website at the Center for Cost-Effective Government. Oh, but Steve, there were deficits in the Trump years. Yes, there were, because Congress was spending more money, not because they didn't have enough money coming in. If they just kept spending flat, we would have had a reduction in the deficit. You had more money coming in, but even more money being spent by this reckless Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike. Don't buy the argument that raising taxes brings in more money and you could do better things for the public. I'll give you an example, an anecdote. When I was an assemblyman, back in like 2001, 2002, in New York, I was a Democrat at the time, in with the Democratic caucus. I was a Long Island Democrat, a rather fiscally conservative Democrat. But you had conservative Democrats upstate, moderates on Long Island, socialists in New York City. Those socialists in the city, they'd go out publicly and derail all of the people who made money on Wall Street, but they would secretly tell you, oh, I hope they had a good year on Wall Street. Why? Because then those people made more money. You can tax them more and you brought more money in. They knew that. They wanted to help the poor and the middle class. You help them by having a strong economy. You get a stronger economy by cutting taxes. President Trump cut the corporate tax from 35%. We were uncompetitive. These corporations were hiding their money, not hiding them, but shipping them offshore to different islands and to Ireland where the corporate tax was 11%. Cuts it back to 21%. They all said, oh, we're not going to have enough money to run our government anymore. You got more money coming back. Trillions of dollars came back to the United States because you cut the taxes and you created incentive. Another example, the yacht tax. I remember when it was the 1980s, right? And, you might have disliked the yuppies at the time, these high-rising Wall Street types, snot noses. You might not have liked them personally. You said, hey, they're all out there, they're buying the yachts, they're doing this. I got an idea. Let's tax the yachts, okay? We'll get in more money and we'll stick it to those rich guys. You know what happened? Those people stopped buying yachts. They put their money in other things, airplanes, investments, second homes. You know who got hurt? The working class and middle class guys on the assembly line building those yachts. You know what happened after that? Congress had to say, oops, we made a mistake. They stopped buying yachts. We didn't get more money in. We got these people laid off. They reversed it. They revoked it. You know, just the other day, a couple of weeks ago, was Bill Maher echoed something that I had said in my book back in 2020. Not that he looked at my book, but we were saying the same thing. You want to understand the difference between socialism, communism, and free enterprise? Look at an aerial shot as an astronaut at night down on the Earth and zero in on Korea. In the North, it's desolate. It's barren. It looks like no one lives there because there's no activity. Look down on the South. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. It's vibrant. You know what? The North Koreans have more income equality than the South Koreans. You want to live there? You want to live with equally poor with all the others in North Korea? Or do you want to have a chance to better your lot in life through a free enterprise system? In the next segment, I want to talk to you about an anecdote I use with college kids to try to explain to them why the free enterprise system is so much better for them as individuals and for all of us collectively. So come on back in 3 minutes on the right side. We're going to talk about that, more about income inequality and why it's important to support the type of free enterprise system we have that helped revolutionize the world and created all this innovation within the world and a higher quality of life. And then we'll go over a couple of those hot topics in the news today. So stay with us. We'll be back on the Right Side podcast. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
Most people think they have options when searching for the best deals when they travel. But here's the shocking truth. 100% of the major travel agencies are owned by just two entities, Expedia and Booking Holdings. They claim to offer the lowest rates, but due to the hotel rate parity agreement, they all have the same pricing, limiting genuine competition. When you book through these sites, you act as your own travel agent, but the profits are going to organizations that don't support our patriot values. We cannot allow that to continue. So, we decided to make travel great again by starting a US-based travel membership platform, mypatriottravel.com. We are patriots helping patriots. Together, we can disrupt the travel industry by not spending our hard-earned dollars supporting the radical left. For just $29.99 per month, you gain access to true wholesale rates on travel, saving you on average 35% and up to 65%. Book as often as you like, with no limits. Keep your hard-earned dollars in your pocket and spend them on things you need and want to support. Go to mypatriottravel.com/TAFW and grab your membership today. mypatriottravel.com/TAFW, making travel great again.
Hey, fellow patriots, it's Cindy Gross here, host of Right for America from your favorite place, the America First Warehouse. You've seen me show on my show so many products from this country's #1 most patriotic manufacturer with close to 400 products. You need to exchange the products you use in your house to this company and make your dollars count in our country.
I'm sure you guys remember the platinum single, Justice for All, with Donald Trump and the J6 Prison Choir. Well, get ready for round 2. We're coming out with Anthem of the Free with High Res and the J6 Prison Choir. It's coming out now. It's pre-sale until December 19th when it drops. Get yours on all platforms, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Get it. It's going to be hot.
Justice for all, our voices ring. The anthem of the free.
It's me, Joe the Box, the America First Warehouse, most patriotic venue in all the land.
The America First Warehouse, a beacon for all to see. A symbol of unity. For the patriots of America, we stand tall and free. In the America First Warehouse, where our hearts will always be.
Hey, folks, welcome back. This is our last segment of our 1 hour show on the Right Side podcast. I'm Steve Levy, your co-host, former Suffolk County executive and New York State Assemblyman. And usually I'm here with David Zaire, who's out on assignment today. So in the last segment, I started talking about one of the chapters in my book, The Solutions to America's Problems, and I harped on income inequality and how so many young people and socialists and the far left harp on inequality. And their idea is we'd be a better America if we just had everyone living the same way, the same standard of living, just take people's stuff and spread it out evenly, which is the communist way to go or the socialist way to go. And what I try to point out is that all that's going to do is make everyone's quality of life suffer and snuff out the innovation and the entrepreneurial spirit that made America such an exceptional country. I often note about Jonah Goldberg's book, Suicide of the West. Very good book. I read it a couple of years ago. And, there's others like Douglas Murray. He talks about the suicide of the West as well. And Mark Levin does. And it's this white guilt. It's this feeling that, we've succeeded and we must have done something wrong if we succeeded. We had to have gotten that success by exploiting others. And that's the mindset these days with critical race theory in our schools and DEI. And there's an attempt to tear down our systems. And what Goldberg had noted is that for the majority of human history, people lived in poverty and under tyranny. You were a serf. You had a few oligarchs at the top who lived extremely well, and everybody else was in poverty and with no freedom of expression. And then two things happened that changed the world. The American Revolution that gave us a real constitution that put the individual above the state. And second was free trade that allowed investment of capital and the ability to grow your economy. And over time, people's lots in life were lifted. America showed that just because you're born into a certain peasant class doesn't mean you have to remain there for the rest of your life. A system was developed where you can work your way up. And that's what revolutionized the world. The example that I'll often use to younger folk, especially the college kids who are enamored by socialism, I said, look, let's use this example. Let's say there's 100 of us on a boat, Gilligan's Island kind of thing. We get stranded on an island, and we have to start from scratch. Well, it's understandable that when you're starting off, you're all going to act collectively, and we're going to pick berries, and we're going to try to farm, and we're going to bring it together, and then we'll spread it out equally to others. And you might be able to get by for a short term with that and survive a little bit, but you'll just be at the point of survival. Some might not even make it if you have a bad harvest, for instance, okay? But let's say one day you're wandering along the island and you see someone that's already existing on it, and they're living in this really, really big house. And this guy's got all this big machinery, and he's farming his land, and he's doing so well. He's feeding his family amazingly, right? So you start talking, and that farmer says, hey, let's make a deal here. I'll tell you what, I'll loan you some of my equipment so that you can plow your fields and bring a much better harvest. You'll triple your harvest if you borrow my stuff. All right, well, what do we give you in return? I'll tell you what, just give me 10% of your harvest. And they say, sounds like a deal. So you borrow his equipment. That's capital that you just borrowed from a lender. You go out and you start using this equipment to farm your field. Now, all of a sudden, your harvest has ballooned. Everybody is living better. You give him back his 10%, he's richer, you're richer, the pie has grown for everyone. Then after a while, people are becoming self-sufficient and they say, hey, you know what? I'm getting a little tired of this guy not working and him getting the same share of me. I want to have my little piece that I can farm, and if I want to work harder, I'll get more. If I don't want to work hard, I'll work less, but I'll have less of it, okay? And that's how capitalism, that's how free enterprise grew into existence and really exploded economic growth throughout the world. That's Adam Smith's formula. It's not a bad thing. It's not an evil thing. It couples off of human nature. All right? If we have a situation now where in America and in these socialist nations where we're defying human nature. If you pay people more to stay home than to go to work, guess what, folks? Folks are going to stay home. That's what we're doing. We've got Democrats now who balk at the idea of telling someone who's getting Medicaid, oh, we'll give you Medicaid. We're not going to let you die from your medical problems. We'll give you food. We're not going to let you starve, but you got to work. Here's a job. You got to work for it. We don't do that anymore. It's absolutely abysmal. It's contrary to the whole concept of human nature. But we understood years ago that if you allow people to invest their effort and come together by borrowing money and lending money, you can grow the pie for everyone and everyone benefits. So that's a nice little anecdote that you can tell to your college kid when he or she comes home at the Christmas table where you guys are arguing over politics. And hopefully you don't argue to such an extent that you can't love each other and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. I want to veer off into some of the hot issues of the day. Hey, my gosh. Susie Wiles, right, goes on an interview. It seemed like it was a month-long interview with Vanity Fair. What the hell was she thinking? This is Trump's chief of staff. He's got her on tape rambling on for, hours on end, and he clips out the quotes. And it was pretty devastating. I mean, she was talking about criticizing immigration policy, criticizing Pam Bondi, criticizing Elon Musk, saying the deportation policies are problematic, basically saying that her boss Trump has alcoholic tendency, tariffs were a problem. What are you doing? What are you doing? And the worst part of this is someone in the White House had to approve this. She didn't just go off on her own and say, hey, I'm just going to have this interview with Vanity Fair. That's like saying I'm going to have an interview with Rolling Stone magazine or The Atlantic. These people hate Republicans. Why would you do this? You couldn't have an interview with Newsmax, Fox, the Washington Examiner, or the America First Warehouse? Come on, Susie. You were supposed to be the grown-up. You were supposed to be the one who had no drama. You showed yourself to be very, very naive here. And to my Republican friends, don't blame the guys from Vanity Fair. He recorded it. She said it. They lulled her into just saying anything she was believing. I don't know if she was sipping on wine when she was doing this. But, Susie, you got to be better than that. I'll tell you, somebody did that to me under my administration, I would have fired him. That was pretty bad, pretty bad. All right, a couple of other things going on here. Australia, what a atrocity down there where these Islamic extremists, two of them, father and son started firing away. And, it goes back to what I've been saying. If you import the third world, you become the third world. It's not to say that we shouldn't allow Muslims to come to our country, other countries. Absolutely, they're wonderful, loving people. And but when you have a culture that teaches children from coming out of the womb that Jews are dogs and the devil, and so are non-Muslims, that's a problem. You better vet these people very strongly, far more than we are now. Now, not everybody's taught this crap, but the madrasas do this. throughout the Muslim world. And when you're importing people from these areas, you got to do better vetting. I was talking to some friends the other day, young couple. One of them's a teacher, and he's talking about how in schools they barely talk about 9/11, or they just talk about the wonderful things that the first responders did. And I said, that's great, but that's not the whole story of 9/11. We should also be telling our students about how we were attacked by Islamic fundamentalism. So, oh, well, that's a good way to get fired. I said, why would that be a good way to be fired? It's a fact. And if we bury our heads in the sand and try to be politically correct, as they were in Australia, when they were saying, Albanese, the head guy there, the prime minister, instead of calling out Islamic terrorism, was instead talking about gun control. This was not a gun control issue. It wasn't a semi-automatic weapon. It was a legal gun. And, the problem was Islamic fundamentalism. You have to identify the problem if you're going to come up with a solution. And we see the same thing in with the Somali culture that got imported into Michigan, right? They had $1 billion worth of fraud in the system. And the governor and the mayor and the attorney general over there were so scared of being called Islamophobes that they let it happen right under their nose. Just like in the UK, the woke elected officials were allowing their English women to get raped by the immigrants coming in because they were afraid of calling it out and publicizing it because they might be deemed Islamophobic. We're in a scary, scary state here, ladies and gentlemen. What I talk about in my solutions to America's problems is if you want a solution, you first have to be honest about what the root causes of these problems are. I hope you'll pick up my book and read about it on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, and go to my website as well, folks. That's the Center for CostEffectiveGovernment.org, and look at all of our white papers. Look for me at stevelevy.info to look at all my commentary in Newsmax. I'm a Newsmax contributor, Washington Times, Washington Examiner, so many other periodicals. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful pre-holiday event. We will see you in a couple of weeks after the holidays. Until then, God bless you all. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.